All right, so in this video we're checking out the FUS X111. I think that's the name of this company, FUS or Fuzz. And this company is kind of new. They think they've come up with a couple new models in the micro size on being good. There's this Cinewhoop, 2.5 inch Cinewhoop, and then there's like a 2.5 inch or 65 millimeter prop toothpick. And these guys are new. I don't really know a whole lot about the company, or perhaps they were a different company and are renaming themselves. Don't really know a whole lot about that. So I know there's going to be some questions about, what are they any good or not? They seem to be new, and I think this is going to be a trend going forward into 2021. Is we're going to probably see a lot of these drone companies pop up and make some new models, some different stuff, and we'll have to see whether or not they stick around or not, because apparently it's pretty easy to contract manufacture drones at various factories in China. So this is probably, probably a few people that maybe were at a different company and started their own company. It's kind of how these new companies start, and then they just know people at the factory and make these new models based off of different designs. So this one here, obviously 2.5 inch Cinewhoop, is probably an exercise in extreme minimalism. This is super thin in terms of all the little supports and everything. And I got some comments. I think I posted something like this up on Facebook or Instagram or somewhere, and people were saying, well, this is extremely obviously they've never flown this before, and they're just like, oh, just based on what it looked like in pictures, this will just instantly break. And I can tell you that it probably won't break in most Cinewhoop type crashes if you're just bumping into stuff and falling to the ground. These little spires here, I don't know what these call, the duck supports or whatever, they're very skinny. They're about 2 millimeters, but they're very stiff, and this whole frame is extremely stiff. It doesn't bend at all. Obviously, if you run it over with a truck, it'll break. Of course, pretty much anything will. But yeah, to say this is extremely weak is probably not taking into account all the little things that are going on here. The carbon itself is very skinny, and it's going to allow for good airflow, and this does have very good flight characteristics because there's not as much stuff blocking the airflow going underneath. I think what's going to break more is not the carbon, but the plastic ducts here. These are, and you can probably see, 3D printed, and where the screws go into the bottom here of the duct, that's probably where things are going to break. That's where the metal goes into the plastic here. That stress point is where you're going to have a lot of weakness. Now, that being said, probably I would recommend after every flight, go through each one of these screws on the bottom, at least ones that go into the duct. Make sure that they're tight. Don't over tighten them because they'll strip them out. Just make sure they're not loose, because probably after several flights they may loosen up from the vibrations. But if this plastic 3D printer duct didn't have this foam bumper on the outside, I'd say, yeah, you're gonna hit something and those are probably gonna crack. But you're gonna have to hit something really hard at extreme speed to cause this duct to actually completely collapse and break, because this foam is going to absorb a lot of the energy of the impact, and because it's got adhesive around the outside, it's going to hold the whole thing together. So it's going to require something of extreme force hitting, say like right here, straight on, enough force for it to bend this whole thing along with the foam and have this whole thing crack. Of course, anything's possible. If you have a fail-safe at say 100 feet and you land straight down onto concrete, there's a good chance a lot of things are going to break. So this is not super heavy. I'll show you the weight here in a little bit. So that is an advantage, because it doesn't have a lot of mass the way it comes, because it is really, look at all these cutouts. There's it's more or less like each of the individual parts by themselves are probably very weak, but the whole thing put together collectively is fairly strong. It's kind of like a bridge, like when you look at the way a bridge is designed, you have a lot of very thin pieces holding a lot of weight, but the overall collective design of the bridge actually supports all that weight. So it's kind of what they're going for here. They strategically cut out places where they could, remove weight as much as possible. But again, things aren't as protected. So, the bottom here is a little bit open. Now the flight controller is kind of pushed up to the top there, and you see a 20 by 20 mounting here, I believe. That's going to be, they're saying you could probably put a Vista here if you want to convert this to digital, but it's going to be tight. You're going to have to put it up right against the flight controller there, or maybe strip the Vista down and take the heat sinks off, perhaps something like that. It's possible. If you want to see a conversion of this to DJI, let me know in the comments. But I think only analog is available, and also only plug and play is available. No receiver, no different receiver version, so you do have to add your own receiver. It does come with these two little tubes for the XM Plus and receiver, which I put in here, and we also have two antennas here for the XM Plus. Of course, it'll work with other ones. I just happened to use the XM Plus because that's what I had, but I stuck it right there. And at first I thought, well, I'm going to have to take this whole thing apart to get inside to the flight controller to solder those wires, and I actually didn't have to. What I did was I just shoved the receiver up through this little slot here, and I had the wires. As you can see there, the receiver wires there, and I just fished them under the carbon here and under the battery strap, and carefully using some very skinny tweezers soldered to those three pads right there. So you have ground, 5 volts, and signal right there. And they do provide a little bit of documentation. This is the wiring diagram, and that's the front here, and this is where the receiver was wired up to. And this flight controller board, it's a 20 amp all-in-one. I think this is made by the same factory that makes all the JHE MCU boards, and also the ones from Aurora RC. I think they're all basically the same board. I have several of them, but what's different about this one is the way the USB port is. So in all the other ones you'll see, the USB port is horizontal and comes out the side. So obviously that's not going to work here, and the way they designed this frame, because otherwise they'd have to put a hole in the duct there. So what they did is they actually removed the USB port and resoldered it vertically, where they're probably using a different USB port here that actually will work in a vertical fashion. You can see the sort of hacked solder job that they did here. And this is a problem because my USB port is rather flaky. I have to hold the plug-in and actually provide a little bit of force or a little bit of pressure to one side so that it actually connects to the computer. I think that possibly one of the data pins inside the USB port is perhaps damaged or something like that, and maybe from this particular port that they're using, or it may be that they didn't solder it on correctly. I can get it to work. I just have to hold it. Like I put the plug-in in, I hold I think it's this side over here, and while I'm messing around in the computer, I have to basically hold the plug-in. If I let go, then I lose the connection and disconnect. So another problem is if this flight control board should die, or if you burn an ESC, then you're not going to be able to find a replacement. Don't think this is offered as a spare part where the port is at this specific angle. So it'll just come out the side. So you either have to cut a hole in the duct or something like that if you're going to be replacing the flight controller board. So that is a bit of an issue. And again, it's pretty inexpensive. It's like $99, I believe, and it's probably a coupon code, whatever. Blah blah blah. Yeah, I think I talked enough about the frame here and stuff. I mean, it's got other standard components. RunCam, 2. It's got some LEDs in the back. That's nice. The video transmitter is, typical analog video transmitter. It's a pretty small one. I think it's 200 milliwatts. And then they're using these sort of old school motors here, and they're 11. What are these? 1106. Yeah, they're 1106 3800 kV, so a little low, on the low end side for kV. 3S and 4S will probably work. I flew it on a 4S 450, So this is the battery I use. This is the Allen Force 450. Pretty good battery. It just fits right in here like so. And this battery strap is kind of not the greatest, but you can always find alternative battery straps. And I was getting roughly 3.5 minutes of flight time on this, sometimes more, sometimes less. I think if you wanted to switch to some less aggressive props, you could probably get a little bit more flight time. So like maybe the HQ 2.5 by 2 by 3s, that would be maybe give you maybe the 30 seconds of flight time if you want a different prop. It didn't seem like it came with any special tune on here, but I just flew it out of the box the way it came, and it seemed fine on the Force 450. So you can, obviously you'll see the flight itself. I did fly with the Insta360 Go camera, and with this little mount that I just pulled this off of, I think, the Beta 85 Pro 2 that I flew this on original these little mounts before, and it just uses the M2 screws here. So yeah, that's how I got the HD footage on this camera. If you guys want to see like a GoPro Lite mount made for this, let me know. I don't know how much interest there is in this specific model. I think I asked a couple times before and no one responded, so apparently GoPro Lights aren't that interesting to a lot of people. So I don't really make a lot of effort into making these mounts, because if no one's interested, there's kind of no point in me putting forth the hours and hours of work to put one together. Alright, so here's what it weighs, and I'm not sure if it's going to come out on camera. Oof, yeah, it's not going to come out on camera. Okay, it's 124.5 grams, so throw the battery on here. Force 450, and it's 177. And the Insta360 Go, and we're coming in 195, so pretty light overall. Anyway, so if you're looking for a smaller, lighter Cinewhoop in this sort of class size, this is, for a 2.5-inch prop. Something similar would be like the Beta 95X. Obviously, I think that one's like about $150 for the analog version. So pricing is always changing all the time. So this is definitely one of the more inexpensive choices out there. Don't know how well these motors are going to hold up. These are, I don't know if these are like maybe DOS branded motors that have been rebranded. I know there's a lot of like stuff out there, like in terms of parts that are, been around a while. Like 1106 motors have been around for a really long time. And then the way these are very notchy, like a lot of the more modern motors don't feel this way. So you're going to have to, that's one thing. On the Pitoon, I did change one thing, and that's the digital min throttle, or digital idle. So I think it's like out of the box, it was set to like 3% or something like that, which is basically on even a 4S, like I think this prop here wasn't spinning on when you would arm. So I actually raised it up to 6.5%, and that seemed fine. So if it's too low on something like this kind of notchy motor like this, you are at risk of having a death roll. But that's only if you're going to be doing like acro and stuff, and like, lots of flips and rolls, this is not really for. So it may not be a problem for you if you're just kind of flying around Cinewhoop style. But I thought the digital idle was a little bit on the low side. It does, if you drop the throttle too much, then one of the motors might stop, and then it'll death roll on you. So if you want to avoid that, I would suggest raising your digital 6.5%. That seemed to be fine for me. Anyway, so overall, I think it's a less expensive option. Don't know much about the company. Don't know much about how well these parts are going to hold up over time. I think the frame itself seems to be okay in terms of its rigidity and what it's supposed to do. I mean, as a Cinewhoop, it's supposed to protect property from the props, and I think it's doing that fine. This will be fine for indoors. It's not too super loud. Of course, the 2540 props are somewhat loud, but it's not as loud as a 3-inch heavier Cinewhoop. So if you put a GoPro Lite on this, you're gonna get some pretty decent footage, from a much lighter Cinewhoop setup, and it's a little bit less expensive than some of the other options out there like the Beta 95X. So that's something to keep in mind. But then again, there are the other side. You don't know a whole lot about the company or the parts or the longevity of this, because it is a newer company. A lot of these things are kind of unknown. So I think that's sort of the trade-off you're making here in terms of getting this at a lower cost. Is you're perhaps getting this from a company that doesn't have any support or spare parts, that kind of thing. You're a little bit more on your own. But if that's the case, if you have the skills to do the building and the repairs and all that kind of stuff, and you don't mind, and you don't want to spend the extra money, then I thought this flew totally fine. Anyway, here's the flight footage. That's enough of me rambling on about this, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. So this is just the stock tune. I didn't do any tuning at all. Just wanted you guys to hear what it sounds like. I'm running this on a 4S 450. And it's a little bit windy right now. It's hard to see. There's nothing really blowing around too much. Oh, there you can see the tape blowing a little bit. It's a little bit of a breeze. So this is very light, but it seems to be able to handle wind okay. Video is not too bad considering it's just analog. As you can see, it's kind of hard to see scraggle like that right there if you want to go through this area. That's typical for analog. I imagine the video from the Insta360 Go is probably pretty smooth. But for Cinewhooping, seems totally fine. Flying with no problems. Pretty decent flight time on a 4S 450. You do have to raise the digital min throttle. It's like 3% or something out of the box, and that's kind of too low. You're probably going to get some death rolls if you don't change that. I think mine's at like 6.5%. Overall, pretty smooth. 3.5 minutes, so thinking 4 minutes easy, shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, still at 14.2 volts. And now we're dropping. Yeah, about 4 minutes, about what I thought. Let me know what you guys think.